Chapter 1. The Dead Zone. The GPS died 3 miles back, somewhere between a rusted-out tractor and a tree that looked disturbingly like a crooked finger pointing me toward hell. I tapped the screen of my phone. No bars, just the blinking mockery of the no service icon. Perfect, I mumbled, the sound of my own voice startlingly loud in the cramped cabin of my 2012 Honda Civic. Statistically speaking, this is exactly where the horror movie starts. First the technology fails, then the judgment. I shifted gears, wincing as the engine screamed in protest. The road to Shadow Ridge wasn't really a road, it was a suggestion carved into the side of a mountain that clearly didn't want visitors. Gravel crunched and popped under my tires, threatening to slide me off the edge and into the white void of fog waiting below. I wasn't scared. Well, I wasn't just scared. I was fascinated. I reached for the voice recorder sitting in the passenger seat. I clicked it on, needing to hear something other than the wind howling through the cracks in my window seals. Entry 4, I said, forcing a clinical detachment into my tone. Elevation is approximately 3,000 feet. The transition from deciduous hardwood to boreal forest is abrupt. It feels heavy, older.
I adjusted my glasses, gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. I was running away. That's what this was. I was 24 years old, a PhD candidate with no funding, no apartment, and a crippling case of imposter syndrome. I had packed everything I owned into this car and rented the cheapest, most isolated cabin on the internet. Blackwood Cabin. The listing had been sparse. No Wi-Fi, no neighbors, no noise. Suddenly, the trees broke. I slammed on the brakes, the car skidding slightly in the mud before coming to a halt. There it was. The photos online hadn't captured the sheer, oppressive weight of the place. Blackwood Cabin wasn't a cozy vacation rental. It was a fortress of rotting timber and dark stone, perched on a precipice of jagged rock. I killed the engine. Silence rushed in, heavy and ringing. Just the wind moving through the pines, a sound that sounded too much like whispering. I opened the car door and stepped out. The cold hit me instantly. It smelled of pine sap, wet earth, and something metallic, like ozone or blood. I looked up at the house again. A single massive chimney rose from the slate roof, but there was no smoke. It looked abandoned, but as I stared at the dark glass of the second-story window, a shiver danced down my spine. The hair on my arms stood up. It was the feeling you get in a library when you realize someone is watching you from the stacks. I wasn't alone. I took a step toward the porch, my boots crunching loudly. Somewhere in the distance, a twig snapped. A heavy sound, too heavy for a deer. "Hello," I called out. My voice sounded thin, instantly swallowed by the vastness of the woods. Nothing answered but the wind. I walked to the trunk of my car to grab my bags. As I reached for the handle, I froze. On the ground, just at the edge of the tire tracks, was a print in the mud. I crouched down. It wasn't a tire track. It was a paw print. I spread my hand next to it. My hand was small, sure, but this was gargantuan. No dog had feet that big. Canis lupus, I whispered, the Latin rolling off my tongue out of nervous habit. I looked back at the dark, silent tree line. Theme stated, I muttered to myself. Things die up here if they don't know their place. I grabbed my duffel bag and marched toward the rotting stairs. I was Elara Vance. I was here to find the truth behind the stories. And the stories had been waiting for me.
Chapter 2. The Apex Predator. The cabin wasn't just cold, it was aggressively frigid. It was the kind of cold that didn't just sit on your skin, but tried to evict your soul from your body. I had spent the last hour trying to coax the wood stove into something resembling a fire. My results so far were smoke, a blackened hand, and a profound respect for anyone who lived before the invention of central heating. Thwack. The sound cracked through the thin walls like a gunshot. I froze, a piece of kindling in my hand. Thwack. It was rhythmic, heavy, a sound of violent purpose. I stood up, wiping soot onto my leggings, which were already proving to be woefully inadequate for the boreal microclimate I had so smugly identified earlier. I grabbed my glasses from the mantel, shoved them onto my face, and moved to the window. The fog had lifted just enough to reveal the yard, and there, standing by a massive stump that looked like a butcher's block, was the landlord, Silas Blackwood. The rental listing had described him as on-site property manager. It had not mentioned that he was built like a siege engine.
He was massive, easily 6'5", with shoulders that strained the fabric of his flannel shirt. He wasn't swinging the heavy iron axe, he was wielding it. There was no wasted movement. He raised the axe, paused for a microsecond to align the kinetic chain, and brought it down. The log didn't just split, it exploded. I grabbed my coat. The air outside tasted like snow and sawdust. I stepped off the porch, my boots crunching on the gravel. "Mr. Blackwood?" I called out, trying to project confident tenant rather than trespassing prey. He didn't turn. He just reached for another log. "I'm Elara Vance," I tried again, stepping closer. "I rented the cabin. I think the flue in the wood stove might be stuck. It's smoking." Silas froze. The axe hung in the air, suspended by one hand as if it weighed nothing. Slowly he turned. Up close, the violence of him was even more palpable. His beard was dark charcoal, shot through with silver, but it was his eyes that stopped the breath in my throat. They were amber, gold really, and they caught the flat winter light in a way human eyes shouldn't. "You're small," he rumbled. His voice was gravel grinding on bone. "The picture's online. You looked taller. Go back inside."
My spine stiffened. I wasn't going to be bullied by a lumberjack. "I don't need to be tall to pay rent," I said, my voice sharpening. "And I don't need you to be polite. I just need you to fix the chimney so I don't die of carbon monoxide poisoning." Silas rested the head of the axe on the stump. I saw the scar then, a jagged white line running from his shoulder. It was a claw mark, a big one. He walked toward me until he was looming over me, blocking out Bookout sun. He smelled of pine sap, wood smoke, and something sharp, like ozone before a storm. "You think this is a game," he said. "You think because you read some books you know the world. The mountains don't care about your degrees, girl. Things die up here if they don't know their place." "Is that a threat?" I whispered. "It's a forecast," he said. He pointed the handle toward the cabin. "The damper is closed. There's a lever on the left. Pull it. And lock your door at night," he added. "The wolves are hungry this year." I watched him destroy the wood with that terrifying, disciplined lethality. I pulled my notebook out of my pocket. "Subject, Silas Blackwood," I wrote. "Territorial, aggressive, apex predator." Fascinating.
Chapter 3. The Bone Chime. Civilization, it turned out, was a relative term. Shadow Ridge proper was less a town and more a cluster of buildings huddling together for warmth in the valley floor. There was a gas station that looked like it hadn't seen a health inspector since the Reagan administration, a diner named Ma's, and a general store that smelled aggressively of sawdust and stale tobacco. I parked my Civic between a rusted pick-up and a sheriff's cruiser. My phone chimed, a frantic, desperate sound as it finally connected to a cell tower. A dozen notifications from my advisor, Dr. Holloway, flooded the screen. "Where are you? The review board needs the revised abstract by Friday." I swiped them away. I didn't have an abstract. I had a paw print the size of a dinner plate and a landlord who could bench press a Toyota. I grabbed my tote bag and headed for the general store. I needed coffee, batteries for my voice recorder, and maybe some wolfsbane. I was joking about the last one. Mostly. The bell above the door jingled, a cheerful sound that died instantly in the heavy silence of the shop. Two men in camo jackets stopped talking near the counter. The cashier, a woman with hair teased to the heavens, paused with a pack of cigarettes halfway to the shelf. "Afternoon," I said, my voice sounding too bright, too city. The men turned back to their conversation, their shoulders tight. The cashier just blinked. "Help you?"
she asked, her tone flat. Just grabbing some basics, I said. I grabbed a carton of eggs, a loaf of bread, and the strongest coffee they had. I was reaching for a pack of AA batteries when a shadow fell over me. You're the one staying at the Blackwood place. It wasn't a question. I turned to see a man in a beige uniform standing at the end of the aisle. He looked tired. There were coffee stains on his shirt, and deep lines bracketed his mouth, as if he spent a lot of time frowning at things he wished he hadn't seen. News travels fast, I said, trying for a smile. It's a small valley, miss, he said. He stepped closer, offering a hand. Sheriff Miller. Jim.
Miller hooked his thumbs into his belt, looking me up and down with a weary assessment. Quiet isn't exactly what you'll find up on that ridge, Miller said softly. He glanced around the store, lowering his voice. Silas, he values his privacy. He's got a heavy load to carry up there. He seems capable, I said, thinking of the way he'd obliterated the firewood. Oh, he's capable, Miller muttered. That ain't the problem. He leaned in, his eyes serious. Listen to me, Ellie. You stay in the cabin at night. You don't go wandering past the tree line. And if you hear things, you just turn up the radio. What kind of things? I asked. Miller's face shut down. The kind that don't take kindly to tourists. Just leave Silas alone, okay? Don't poke the bear. Or whatever else is up there. He tipped his hat and walked away before I could ask what whatever else meant. I paid for my groceries, the cashier practically throwing my change at me.
I was about a mile up the access road when I saw it. A trailer sat in a small clearing, almost invisible behind a wall of kudzu and bone chimes, hundreds of small animal bones clicking together in the wind. Sitting on a rocking chair was a woman who looked like she'd been carved out of a dried apple. She lifted a hand and beckoned. I pulled over. You got the scent on you, girl, the woman rasped. I beg your pardon? The wolf, she said. You smell like ozone and fear. He's already marked you, hasn't he? If you mean Mr. Blackwood, he's my landlord. The woman laughed. Landlord, that's a good one. He's the warden, child, serving a life sentence on that dirt so the rest of us can sleep at night. She pressed an object into my palm. It was a single vertebrae tied to a piece of red twine. Hang this on your door, Odette commanded. The iron in the ground holds the big ones back, but the little ones, they sneak. This will sing if they get too close. I walked back to my car, the bone chime heavy in my hand. I wasn't afraid. I was onto something. Chapter 4. The Autopsy of Fear. Night at Blackwood Cabin didn't fall. It collapsed. 1 minute, the sky was a bruised purple. The next, it was an absolute suffocating black. The kind of darkness that felt heavy against the glass, like the ocean pressing against a submarine. I was sitting at the rickety kitchen table, my laptop open to a blank page. The cursor blinked at me, mocking my lack of progress. I had typed the title, Appalachian Liminal Spaces, a Case Study, and then spent 40 minutes listening to the wind try to peel the shingles off the roof. I reached for my coffee, only to find it ice cold, again. Focus, Elara, I muttered. You didn't drive 600 miles to be intimidated by bad lighting. Then I heard it. It wasn't a knock. It was a drag. Something heavy and wet being pulled across the gravel outside. Scrape, thud, scrape. I froze. The sheriff's warning echoed in my head. Turn up the radio. Mama Odette's warning rattled in my pocket. The woods remember. I went to the door. The bone chime Odette had given me was hanging on the knob, silent. I took a breath, unlocked the deadbolt, and pushed the door open. The cold hit me first, smelling of iron and wet fur. Silas was standing at the edge of the porch light's reach. He was shirtless, despite the freezing temperature. Steam rose from his broad shoulders, his skin slick with sweat and something darker. He was holding a rope. At the end of the rope, sprawled in the dirt, was a 10-point book. Its throat had been torn out. Silas looked up at me. His eyes were hard, challenging. He dragged the carcass a few feet closer. Found this near your car, he rumbled. Thought you should see what lives in these woods. I stepped off the porch. Silas stiffened. Don't come closer. It's fresh. I can see that, I said. My voice was surprisingly steady.
I crouched down in the dirt. I shined my light on the wound. No tool marks, I mumbled. The tissue is shredding, not sliced. This wasn't a knife. Silas, hold the light.
For a second, silence stretched out. Then a large, calloused hand reached down and took the flashlight from me. "You're weird," he grunted. "I'm thorough," I corrected. I used my fingers to spread the fur around the wound. I used a pen to measure the distance between the canine punctures. 4 inches, I whispered. The bite radius is 4 inches. I looked up at him. Silas was staring down at me, the flashlight casting harsh shadows across his scarred chest. He was looking at me like I was a puzzle he couldn't solve. "Bears have a bite radius of that size," I said, standing up. "But bears don't kill like this. They maul. This was surgical. 1 bite, severing the artery, instant death. And wolves? Even the biggest timber wolf tops out at 2, maybe 2.5 inches. Silas didn't blink. "Maybe it was a monster," he said softly. "Maybe," I agreed. I took the flashlight back. His skin was burning hot, feverishly so. Or maybe biology is just different up here.
"Are you going to dress it?" I asked. Silas blinked. "What?" "The deer. It's fresh meat. Are you going to butcher it, or just leave it here to attract more monsters?" He let out a short, rough breath. He shook his head. "Go inside, Elara," he said. "I'll handle the carcass." "Okay," I said. I turned to go, then paused. "Silas, thank you." "For what? Showing you a dead body?" "For the data point," I said. I walked back up the stairs and locked the door. My heart was pounding. I pulled out my notebook. "Incident report," I wrote. "Predation event. Bite radius exceeds known taxonomy. Subject, Silas Blackwood. Reaction to gore, indifferent. Reaction to my proximity, agitated." Silas was effortlessly hoisting the 200-pound buck over his shoulder. He carried it toward the main house. "He's not discarding it," I whispered. "He's going to eat it." I shivered, but I didn't pack my bags. I turned the page. "Hypothesis," I wrote. "The monsters aren't just in the woods."
Chapter 5. The Monster in the Glass. The cabin felt too big. The silence inside was heavy, pressing against my eardrums until I started hearing things that were not there. Footsteps on the roof, scratching behind the drywall. So I did the only rational thing a terrified academic could do. I retreated to my car. My beat-up Honda Civic was a sanctuary of stale coffee smells and familiar clutter. It was a metal bubble of the modern world in a landscape that had forgotten time. I sat in the driver's seat, doors locked, engine idling just to run the heater. "Entry 6, I said into the voice recorder, my breath fogging the windshield. Subject, the psychology of isolation. The human mind projects patterns onto chaos. I am currently projecting malice onto, well, everything." I leaned my head back against the headrest, closing my eyes. I was exhausted. I had not slept in 24 hours, my mind replaying the image of that torn-up deer, the precision of the kill, the heat radiating off Silas's skin. Thump. My eyes snapped open. The car shuddered. It was not the wind. Something had hit the rear bumper, hard. I checked the rearview mirror. Nothing but darkness and the red glow of my taillights staining the fog. "Hello?" I whispered, feeling ridiculous. Scrape. Claws on metal. A long, agonizing screech that vibrated through the chassis and straight into my teeth. It was coming from the passenger side. I slowly turned my head. Pressed against the passenger window, illuminated by the dashboard lights, was a face. It was a wolf. But it was wrong. Its fur was matted with mange, patches of raw pink skin visible in the cold. Foam dripped from its jaws, freezing on the glass. But it was the eyes that froze my blood. They were milky, rolling in its skull, devoid of anything resembling animal intelligence. It snarled, a wet, gurgling sound, and slammed its head against the window. Crack. A spiderweb fracture bloomed on the glass. I screamed. I fumbled for the gear shift, jamming the car into reverse. The wolf did not back off. It lunged again, biting the side view mirror and ripping it off with a sickening crunch of plastic. It scrambled onto the hood, its claws gouging the paint, sliding toward the windshield. "Get off!" I shouted, hitting the horn.
The noise only seemed to enrage it. It threw itself at the windshield, snapping at the glass right in front of my face. I could smell it through the vents, rot and sickness. I hit the gas, the tires spinning in the mud. The car lurched backward, but the wolf held on, driven by a madness that ignored physics. Crack! The windshield gave way. A spiderweb of glass bowed inward. One more hit and it would be in my lap. I covered my face, bracing for the teeth. Then the world exploded in gray. Something massive slammed into the side of my car. The impact was so hard, my head bounced off the side window. The rabid wolf on my hood did not just fall off, it was erased. I looked up, gasping for air. Standing on the hood of my car, occupying the space where the sickness had been a second ago, was a beast that defied biology. It was a wolf, yes, but it was to the rabid creature what a tank is to a bicycle. Its fur was the color of iron and storm clouds, dark, thick, and lustrous. It was huge, its paws easily the size of dinner plates, denting the metal of my hood with their sheer weight.
The gray beast didn't snarl back. It didn't posture. It simply poured itself off my car like liquid shadow. It moved with a terrifying, disciplined silence. The rabid wolf lunged, wild and messy. The gray beast slipped the attack with a shift of its shoulder, a boxer dodging a clumsy haymaker, and struck. It wasn't a bite, it was a dismantle. The gray wolf clamped its jaws onto the attacker's spine. There was a single sickening crunch, sharp and final. The rabid wolf went limp instantly. It was efficient, it was brutal, it was professional. The gray wolf dropped the carcass into the mud with a disdainful thud. I sat there, my heart hammering so hard I thought I was going into cardiac arrest. The gray wolf stood over the body for a moment. Then, slowly, it turned its massive head toward me. I stared into its face. The muzzle was scarred, a line of white fur interrupting the gray, and the eyes were amber. They were gold. They were intelligent. They were Silas. He gave a low, rumbling huff, a sound of frustration, and turned away. He vanished into the tree line, disappearing into the fog as if he had never been there at all. The landlord was not just fixing the fences. He was the fence.
Chapter 6. The Fever State. Adrenaline is a liar. It tells you that you can run forever, fight anything, and that your hands definitely are not shaking. My hands were shaking. I was back inside the cabin, the heavy deadbolt thrown. My car was a ruin in the driveway, a testament to the violence I had just survived. But my brain, my stubborn academic brain, was already trying to dissect the impossible. I paced the small living room, my notebook clutched like a holy text. Canis lupus, I muttered, pacing from the fireplace to the window and back. Sexual dimorphism doesn't account for a mass increase of that magnitude. It defied the square cube law. The kinetic energy required to shatter a windshield with a standing jump. I stopped. I looked at the bone chime hanging on the doorknob. It was silent now, but I swore I could still hear the ghost of its warning rattling in my ears. It wasn't a wolf, I whispered, the truth tasting like ash in my mouth. And it wasn't a bear. It was him.
I closed my eyes, picturing those amber eyes staring at me through the shattered glass. Intelligent, haunted. Bang, bang, bang. The pounding on the door was heavy enough to rattle the hinges. I jumped, dropping my notebook. Elara! Silas's voice came through the wood, but it sounded wrong. It wasn't the deep, rumbling baritone of the landlord. It was ragged, strained. Open the door. I hesitated for a fraction of a second, Sheriff Miller's warning warring with the desperation in Silas's voice. I threw the bolt and yanked the door open. Silas collapsed against the doorframe. He was human again, or mostly. He was naked from the waist up, his skin slick with sweat and rain. Steam was literally rising off him, curling into the cold night air like smoke. But it was the blood that froze me. A jagged tear ran down his side, weeping dark crimson over the old white scar I'd seen earlier. His skin was flushed, his eyes bright and feverish. "Pack your bags," he rasped, pushing past me into the room. "Get your keys. You're leaving, now."
Silas, you're bleeding, I said, ignoring his order. I shut the door against the wind and moved toward him. I said, "Go." He spun around, swaying. His eyes were wild, the pupils blown wide. You saw it. You can't stay here." "I saw a wolf save my life," I countered, my voice shaking but firm. "I saw you save my life." He flinched, as if I'd struck him. "I didn't save you. I was cleaning up a mess, just like I'm cleaning this up." He gestured vaguely at me, at the room. "Get in your car. Drive until you hit Boston." "My car is totaled, Silas," I shouted, the frustration finally breaking through. "The windshield is gone. The mirror is gone. I can't drive anywhere." He froze. The information seemed to take a long time to process through his fever haze. He blinked, swaying again. "Then I'll drive you," he mumbled. "Truck. Take the truck. Just have to." His knees buckled. I moved before I thought. I caught him, or tried to. It was like trying to catch a falling oak tree. He crashed to his knees, dragging me down with him. My hands landed on his bare chest. I gasped. He was burning.
It was not a normal fever. It was radiant heat, like touching a car hood in July. It scorched my palms. "You're burning up," I whispered. "Metabolism," he gritted out, his teeth clenched in pain. "Healing costs." He tried to push me away, his hands trembling. "Don't touch me. Dangerous. The instinct, it's not settled yet." "Shut up, Silas," I said, my clinical detachment vanishing, replaced by pure, stubborn competence. I scrambled up and ran to the kitchen. I grabbed the first aid kit I kept in my tote bag and a bowl of water. When I got back, he was slumped against the sofa, his head tipped back, breathing in shallow, ragged gasps. I knelt between his spread legs. It was an intimate position, impossibly close. I could smell him, the ozone, the pine, the blood. I soaked a cloth in the water and pressed it to the wound on his side. He hissed, his whole body seizing. His hand shot out and gripped my wrist. "Elara, stop," he groaned. "If you help me, if you stay, I can't promise I won't hurt you. The wolf, he wants." "What does he want?" I challenged. "He wants to keep you," Silas whispered. "Then let him want," I said softly. I cleaned the blood. I bandaged the tear. I was not the observer anymore. I was the handler, and I had just claimed my beast.